Well, hello. Thank you for joining me and happy Monday. I was actually just outside watering the garden and realized how nice it is outside. I've had a huge migraine all day today, so I haven't been outside. So I hope you are either getting outside now or were able to get outside and enjoy some of the nice weather that we have. It's not quite too hot, but it's also not too cool, so it's kind of the perfect time to get outside and enjoy it a little bit. So I hope you had the ability to do that sometime today or maybe even later this week. I did hear it's going to get a little warmer this week, so be careful depending on where you are, but I hope you took some time and were able to enjoy it. Just a quick reminder for everybody, I am not going to be doing live chat for a couple of weeks because in a couple of days I am having surgery. So I'm going to take some time off just to recoup and recover from that. I will be back probably on the 21st of September with live chat. So just a couple of weeks off. I will still be posting content. You guys can still ask questions and message me if you need anything, but I will only be checking social media sporadically while I take some time to personally heal and just, focus on my own health. So, with that said, I thought tonight we would actually talk about something that I get asked quite regularly. And I don't know that we'll talk for a whole half hour because I have a migraine, but we'll see how it goes. A lot of times I will get asked from people here on Facebook, but also just out in the community as people hear my story, hear what I'm doing, sort of learn more about chasing happiness. People will ask quite regularly, well, how are you defining happiness? What exactly is that? What does it mean? Because it's different for everyone. And this weekend was the review for our book club. If you're a part of the book club, thank you for joining. If you're not, feel free to join. But we read this book, which is actually from the Happiness Research Institute in Copenhagen. And one of the things that it talks about is how do you define happiness? How do you measure it? Because one of the things they do is study happiness. So, how do you measure it? How do you define it? Because that is something that changes quite regularly for people, but it's also something that changes depending on where you live, the lifestyle that you're continuing to live, whether it's in the country you were born in or not. And so there are all these different factors that play a role in how we determine what happiness is and what it means to us. So I thought we would chat a little bit today about how you can kind of define that, because as I talk to people, as I get out in the community, or as I talk to people over Zoom, which most of us are pretty much living via Zoom these days, I hear more and more from people that they're not sure how to define it. They don't know exactly what it is that makes them happy. They just know that something isn't fitting in their lives at the current moment. And with the circumstances being what they are this year, that's completely understandable. And it's 100% something that lots of people are going through, almost everyone in some way, shape, or form, because life has changed so much so quickly. But there are absolutely some things that we can do. So the first thing that I always ask everybody who says to me, I don't know how to define it, how do you define it, how do you measure it, is if you were living your ideal life, don't think about money or circumstances, but if you were living the ideal life that you could possibly live, regardless of any of the circumstances, any of the finances, what would that look like? And the reason that I ask that question is it gives us a starting place. So you now have the ability, if you can picture what that life would be, you can picture what it's going to require to get to that point. You can picture how much of it really would function in the life that you have currently. Are you willing to make some of those changes? So for me, happiness is a whole bunch of things, and it changes quite regularly. But the one thing that I think is really important for everybody to understand is happiness isn't just one aspect of life. So as you're picturing that life, as you're picturing what that life looks like for yourself, think about how that life would unfold. Is it every aspect of it going to be happy and perfect? Probably not. And that's why it constantly changes for all of us. You can be somebody who loves to travel, but maybe at some point, let's say you travel for 6 months, you get sick of traveling and you want to put down some roots. So happiness is one of those things that fluctuates throughout our life. It changes based on our circumstances. How we view it changes. What we think it is changes. Also, how we measure it changes. So maybe for you, happiness is getting together with your friends and going on a ski vacation in the middle of the winter. But it's also being able to stay at home and not have to go out. Happiness can be all of these things that sort of don't match up in a whole bunch of different ways. And that's why it's so hard for us to define it. So the better question for us to ask ourselves is there anything you would like to change about your life? Thinking back to that question that I asked at the beginning of, is there something ideally that you can picture is the life that you want? So you've got that image in your head. You're thinking about what that ideally looks like for you. Now think about, okay, is there any aspect of that that fits into the life that you have now? Is there any aspect of that that can fit into the life that you have now? And how do you sort of connect the two of those things? It can be difficult to do that, but I bet you if you're thinking, let's say, for example, about a ski vacation or a ski holiday with all of your friends, that's probably something you could plan maybe once a year. Maybe that's not every single day of your entire life, but these sorts of things will help us to narrow down the things that make us happy, the people who make us happy, because we don't necessarily rely on other people to make us happy, but being with the people we love, being with the people we care about, absolutely gives us something to look forward to. It gives us moments of joy. It gives us wonderful memories that we can create with the people that we love. But it also reminds us what life is really about. One of the great things about the book that we just finished reading for the book club was it talks about how we are social creatures and we have gotten away from that social aspect of life so much over the last couple of years. Well, I'd say realistically probably 10 or 15, just because of how much social media and technology is dominating every aspect of our lives. So think about all of those ideals and think about the life you have now. Sure, it's not perfect, but is there something you can do to change it? So maybe for you, it's once a year you guys are taking a holiday as friends. You're creating more room for socialization with the people who matter to you. And maybe then that leads you to creating something that gets you one step closer to that ideal life. So if your ideal life is living on a mountainside somewhere so that you can ski every day, maybe you then start to take a job that gets you closer and closer to that goal. Nobody really does this whole creating your ideal life, finding your own happiness, figuring out what that is all in one day or overnight. It's all done via baby steps. Everything we do is little tiny steps at a time to get us to what our ultimate goal is. Hi, Brenda. Thanks for joining. I hope you're having a wonderful Monday. I hope you got outside maybe and enjoyed it a little bit, depending on sort of what the weather was like up where you are. It's just starting to get nice out here. I just went out and watered the garden a little while ago, and it's actually not too bad. So I might go sit outside for a little while, see if I can get rid of my migraine. So I'm just chatting tonight about sort of how we're defining happiness. And you know, because you read the book that we just finished for the book club, that there's lots of different ways to define what it is. And we all kind of have to find what it means to us and how we can create whatever that is in our lives. Brenda says she worked and worked and worked. Yes, the one downfall to creating the happy life that everyone wants is this thing called a job. It tends to get in the way of a lot of things. So I feel you. I completely understand. But I am 100% sure that at some point, I don't know if it'll be in my lifetime or not, jobs will look very different than what they do now. I think right now, one of the reasons why we're all searching as much as we are for happiness, why we're trying to figure out how to create more of it, is because in the last 20 years or so, we have gotten so bogged down with we have to work in order to earn money, in order to live this life that we want to live, that makes us happy, that gives us the ability to hang out with our friends and do all of the things that we want to do. And unfortunately, that financial difficulty has just gotten bigger and bigger over the last 20 years. So you have to work harder and harder. And it's become this sort of cycle. I am hopeful at some point, whether it's in my lifetime or not, that we get to a point where we are a little bit more maybe like the Danish, and work is a 9 to 5 thing. And then you have time to socialize, and people are paid fair wages, and people can afford to actually live life. But we will see if we get there. Fingers crossed. I hope so. I hope so for all the little kids I know now. I hope so for all of the parents I know now who are struggling right now, for all of the people my parents' age and older who want to be able to retire but are afraid about those costs. These are all things we stress out about, and they lead us to a little bit of a less happy life. They lead us to be concerned about how we're going to manage. And if we don't have the finances to create the social environment that we're looking for, if we don't have the emotional energy to get together on a regular basis with the people that we care about and create sort of, wonderful evenings full of movies and social gatherings, then those things sort of fall by the wayside, because our emotional health, our well-being, our mental health takes priority. And if we're emotionally exhausted, as we've been talking about, you and I, Brenda, it kind of becomes this thing, and you don't have the ability to, after a long day at work, invite friends over or create some sort of a movie night in your backyard or all of those things. So I'm hopeful after COVID, we will all get to a place, once this is all done, once we are all safe to do so, that we will get to a place where we can start to build those social circles after work or on weekends, and people aren't quite so stressed out. But how we're defining what that is and how we're defining and measuring our own happiness is going to change based on who we are and what we value in life. So we all value friends, we all value family, but we all value them in different ways. We all value the time that we spend with certain people differently than other people. So the best way for you to be able to answer the question of how do you really define happiness is to start to do things to monitor the things that make you happy, the activities, the physical interactions, the emotional interactions, the communication that you have with other people, which seems like a lot of work, but I promise you it's not. It's just as simple as paying attention to how you feel. So, sorry, I'm sure you heard that very loud bike go by my house, and I apologize. I need to buy, foam or something to sort of insulate the walls, because I'm right on a busy street, and every once in a while that just happens. So one of the things that you can do is just start to pay attention to how you feel. If you notice that you get a little more stressed out when you're interacting with certain people, then cut back from your interactions just a little bit with those people and move your interactions more into the people who make you feel whole, the people who cheer you up on a bad day, the people who give you a reason to smile for no reason, the people who, just thinking about them, whether they're coming over for a Friday night coffee or whether you're having a board game night, the people who fill your heart with love, those are the people who you want to be spending more time with. Those are the people who you want to be interacting more with. And those activities are the things that start to make you happy. Those are the things that you can start to actually define and point to say, well, these things are an aspect of the happy life I want to create. These things are games or interactions or social activities that I want to continue because they make me feel better. At the end of an exhausting week or at the end of a really long Monday, the first thing I want to do is get together with my girlfriends and have, a wine night or whatever the circumstances are for you. That's going to help you to define what happiness really means to you. And I remember I had a conversation, I was probably 6 or 7 maybe. I was very young, with my grandmother while we were baking one day, about baking. And she was asking me if I liked to bake and if I enjoyed the process. And while I said I did, it didn't make me happy at the time. And I couldn't, of course, I was a kid. I couldn't define why it didn't make me happy. It was something that I enjoyed. But now looking back on that conversation, I realized, one, I was too young to understand what happiness really was. But it wasn't that it didn't make me happy. It's that because I was 5 or 6 at the time, I wondered about all the other things I was missing out on because I was spending time baking with my grandmother. But the truth is, now as an adult, 30 some years later, I can look back on those memories and those times, and they do make me happy still to this day. They warm my heart, they make me smile. Every time I smell, whether it's Rice Krispie treats or bacon or turkey, I'm reminded of all of these different things that I used to do with my grandma. So those things are how we define happiness. Those things are how we create the life full of the things that we want, the things that make us happy, the things that bring us joy and help us reduce our stress. Well, hello, Tacey. Thank you for joining. For those of you that don't know, Tacey is my mother. She was out walking, I believe, right before this. So she can definitely comment on the fact that the weather is actually not too bad here in Southern Ontario today. Probably a little more humid than you want it to be if you're going to be outside exercising, but yeah, it's not so bad. So get out and enjoy it if you can. One of the things I think that's happened, and one of the reasons why I think we've sort of lost our connection to what we want our lives to be, what we think our lives are to make us happy, is we've lost our connection to the earth. We spend so much time inside now. We're not really spending time out in nature. We're not, maybe you are sitting in your backyard, but aside from sitting in your backyard, these days, especially because of COVID, how often are you getting out and going for a hike and just enjoying the nature around you? How often are you reconnecting with the earth or walking barefoot in the grass? We don't do those things anymore. And I think because of technology and how overwhelmed with technology we are, I think we've sort of lost a little bit of being able to detect those moments, those calm and peaceful, happy moments. So I think that absolutely needs to be a part of how you assess what your happiness is, how much time you spend not connected to a digital device, how much time you spend, even if it's just sitting and reading a book while, somebody who you love sits and reads a book next to you, whatever the circumstances are. We all have sort of lost our personable connection with people because we are so glued to these devices. And I'm guilty of it too. You guys know I do live chat here on Monday. I do a live chat on Wednesdays on Instagram. I do 900 Zoom meetings a week, it feels like. So we have all sort of lost track of how we define happiness and how we can measure it. So start to think about the things that realistically, even on a daily basis, bring you some joy. So one of the things for me, and I can't pick it up right now because it's like super hot. I didn't realize how hot it would get, is lighting candles. Every time I'm in my office, I light a candle, and I just tried to pick it up. I can't. I'm sorry. But you guys know I'm obsessed with candles. I constantly am burning candles while I'm up here in my office. It's one of the things that brings me joy. It makes me smile. It makes my day a little bit better. And that's part of how I define happiness. Little things that I can add into my day, little things that, even if I don't do them on a daily basis, still make me smile, remind me of a great memory. One of the things Brenda and I talked about at book club over the weekend was baking with your grandparents. Almost every kid did it, especially if you were a kid born in the 80s or before technology and computers became a household thing. That's just something that you did. You baked bread, you baked cookies, you helped make Christmas dinner. And as a family or as a group, you had these shared experiences of making something. And maybe it didn't always turn out. Maybe sometimes it was something that was not edible, but you remember the experience more than the thing that you ate later. And we need more of that because that helps to create happiness. The social connection that we have with people helps to create our happiness. And that is one of the things that they measure, which was really interesting. So for those of you who aren't in the book club, I highly suggest you go out and get the book. I very much enjoyed it, but that's just because I like to learn about how people are measuring this and how it varies from country to country. So it was a very interesting read. But as far as defining it for ourselves, it's something that's difficult to do, and it's difficult for some people who have never tried before. So it is a question I get quite frequently. And the honest answer is it's going to be different for everyone. But the best way for you to figure it out is start to imagine what that ideal life would look like for you. And then think about all the things in your current day, not worrying about money or any of the other stressors, but think about all the things in your current day that you can incorporate that would also be a part of that ideal life. And then what steps do you have to make to get there? So for some people, it's really simple. It's work less. That's not an easy thing for us to do. We need to make money. We need to be able to put a roof over our head and food on the table. So most people can't work less, but some people can work a little bit less while earning more depending on the job they have. So a lot of times it's going to require some thought, and it's not going to be easy decisions. And in some cases, they're not decisions that everybody can make. Not everybody can leave the job that they're currently in, especially in the world of COVID, and go and get a better paying job. But what you can do is start to make plans. You can think about, if I wanted to only work 20 hours a week, how much would I need to make in order to be able to live that kind of a lifestyle? Where could I possibly find a job like that? So a lot of it has to do with planning, thinking about the things that do make you happy, the ideal situation for you. If you had $1 million tomorrow, what would your life look like? None of us is probably going to wake up with $1 million tomorrow, but what we will wake up with is an idea of what those things are, and then we can start to plan how we go about getting them and how we want to measure happiness. Happiness changes quite frequently, no matter who you are or where you live. You could decide one day that this thing, let's say, for example, traveling the world makes you happy. And then a year in, 2 years in, you could decide, you know what, I want to put down roots somewhere. We are all always free to change our minds about what happiness is and how we want to define it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So whoever you are, whether you're Brenda or Tacey or someone watching on the replay, you have the ability to create the life that you want. And the best way to do that is to start to think about what happiness really means to you, what exactly that is, and then picture what that would look like. Because that's going to give you a guidepost to work towards the steps that will create the life that you want. So for me, prior to COVID-19, travel was one of the big things on my list. And so I traveled at least twice a year. Sometimes more, sometimes not quite so much. As you know, with COVID, haven't traveled at all this year. Actually, that's not true. I did travel at the beginning of February, right before COVID hit us. So I did get a little bit of travel in this year, but it was definitely not enough. I actually had 4 trips planned this year and only got 1 in. But it is what it is. Sometimes life circumstances happen. But I can plan for next year and hope for the best and incorporate more travel into my year next year and see whether or not I can make that work. And then I can spend the next few months planning, how am I going to make that work? As long as things are safe, as long as it's okay for me to travel, how do I get on a plane and head back to Disney World in January, for example? And I know some of you are giggling if you're watching on the replay, but I 100% am headed there. I was supposed to go there twice this year and I didn't get to. So it is definitely on my list for 2021. But those are the sorts of things that you have to think about. You have to decide, is that something that you want in your life and how can you make it happen? So even when I was in Edmonton, I did, within a 12-month span, I did Ireland, California, Florida, and the Yukon. And the way that I did that was I took temp jobs. I worked as much as I could to save whatever I needed. And then I would go on that trip. And then I would come back and take another temp job. And then I would plan the next trip. So I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't sat down and thought about, well, what would my ideal life look like? How will I define what that happy life looks like for me? And part of it incorporated travel. So I found a way to make travel something that was more regular in my life. And for you, it could be as simple as having the grandkids over or inviting the neighbors over for a game night. And if that's what it is, then figure out a way to make it a weekly activity or a monthly activity. And you sort of start to slowly change your life to incorporate those things that make you happy, the things that you want to have more regularly in your life. And that's basically how we all define happiness: the things that bring us joy, the things that make us smile, the things that make us forget about the stress that we live with on a regular basis, and the things that we want to do more of. That's happiness. And of course, all of the love and light that we can possibly muster. So ask yourself what that ideal life would look like. Think about how you could possibly start to incorporate some things to get there. And it doesn't happen overnight. You guys know, because you're part of the Chasing Happiness community, that I've been working on chasing happiness for 5 years. And it certainly is not everything I want it to be yet, but it's definitely getting there. So sometimes it's baby steps and it takes time, but other times you can make huge changes really quickly and incorporate way more joy and way more happiness into your regular life. So think about it for this week. I know it's almost 7:30, so I just want to remind you guys, I'm taking 2 weeks off from live chat. There will still be Facebook posts. The thought of the day will still go up. I know some of you have messaged me to say, but we don't want to miss the thought of the day. The thought of the day will still go up every single day. I have preloaded those so that even if I need some time away and can't be on social media personally to answer your emails and stuff, you will get a thought of the day every single day. But I should be back for live chat on the 21st of September. And if you guys do need anything in the interim, I am going to periodically be checking social media and checking emails. I'm not disappearing entirely. I'm just going to kind of be off the grid for at least a week while I try to focus on my own health and recuperate a little bit. But I am still here for you guys if you need anything. So I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope wherever you are, whether you're watching now live or on the replay later, that you are able to get out and enjoy what is left of the summer. I'm not sure how much summer we're going to get left. The days are sort of hot and cold all over. So I have my fingers crossed for a really long fall and a continuation of summer for at least a month or so. But I don't know. Only time will tell. Have an absolutely wonderful week, guys. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming, Tacey and Brenda, to the live tonight. And thank you for watching on the replay. If you guys have any questions or you still aren't 100% sure how you define happiness, feel free to reach out to me. Post in the comments below. I am happy to sit down with you and have a conversation and see if we can't figure it out for you, okay? Have a wonderful week, guys. I will chat with you in a couple of weeks. Bye.